Hi, I'm Michael again, and my project's name is Ricochet Exchange.
What is Ricochet Exchange?
Ricochet Exchange is an exchange on Polygon that attempts to scale dollar cost averaging on chain.
Okay, so Polygon. Now that's a relatively new project. Can you speak to like the process of starting to build on Polygon?
Yeah, so I selected Polygon for some pragmatic reasons, which were that Superfluid and Teller Oracle were both deployed on Polygon. Our project comes from a hackathon scaling ETH, which I believe was May or March or May last year, and so when I went to the hackathon, they had an incentive. Polygon also has an incentive. I knew the teams. I was familiar with the Polygon technology, and it was very simple to use. I had already done some transactions. So, I felt pretty comfortable building on it. The alternative I had was XDAI. We could have used XDAI, but at the time there was more going on Polygon, so that's why we selected it. Since the selection, I've actually found the Polygon team, just by reputation, I knew that they were a really good team, and I found that they were really supportive. One of the notable things was that when we were live on mainnet, when we started talking to them, because we were live on mainnet, they were like, great, we could do a blog post, a partnership announcement, and they already had a template for how to write a blog post announcement, and that really helped us a lot because we're a fledgling team. So it made it really easy. They had some media that were here's what we want to do with the media, and so yeah, it's been a great experience. Customers love it. It's really inexpensive. The only problem right now, this is not a problem with Polygon. Every chain is just getting funds into those platforms. Most of the people I work with use Coinbase. They don't support direct withdrawals to Polygon, so people have to pay a bridging fee, or they have to kind of go through another exchange like Crypto.com, which supports Polygon, or some of the other exchanges which support Polygon. So
support Polygon. So in other words, they don't list the token.
They list Matic, the token,
yeah.
But it's when you're buying it, it's Matic on mainnet, which is a wrapped Matic, because Matic is the native token on Polygon, and so when it was kind of released, it was bridged as wrapped Matic to mainnet. So that's what you're getting on the mainnet is wrapped Matic. But what I mean when I said they don't support Polygon is they don't support withdrawals directly to the Polygon network. Coinbase only supports withdrawals to the Ethereum network, and I've heard it's coming soon, and it'll be great when it does, because so many people, that's their hang up for Polygon, is they just getting the funds on that network is really hard.
What else do people need to know about Ricochet Exchange?
Yeah, so I write all the smart contracts for Ricochet Exchange. So the thing that I think is really important is the way that we allow the dollar cost averaging to scale. We sort of were at the scaling Ethereum hackathon, so our focus was on scaling. And what I noticed with Superfluid was we could actually significantly cut down the amount of block space that we needed. So traditional dollar cost averaging is done with ERC20 transfers, and it's either an unlimited approval on your tokens that you give it, or a big approval, or you deposit all of your tokens into a contract, in which then their dollar cost averaged out. So there's that kind of custody issue. There's also the issue in block space, which is if you're supporting a million users and 1,000 assets, and daily dollar cost averaging, talking about 1 million times 1,000 times 24 transactions, or daily I guess would be 365 days. But nonetheless, those numbers are really big, and there's just physically not enough block space, especially on any one chain, and people mostly do it on one chain. So if we're thinking about how are we going to support millions of people using these tools, we have to think about block space. And so I think the important thing about Ricochet Exchange is using Superfluid's contracts. They're the technology that underlies Ricochet Exchange. We're able to reduce the amount of transactions that are required in order to pay people. And that's primarily, as far as I understand it, it's primarily done with ERC 777 standard. And under the hood, to me, it looks like there's some kind of rebasing that gets done with their wrapped and streamable tokens. So The other thing is we do have, using the streaming technologies, we also have created a novel way to do ICOs and like launches, fair launches. And the way that we do that is we create a contract that emits tokens you fill it up with tokens, and then those tokens are emitted at a set rate, very similar to Bitcoin mining rewards, like every 10 minutes mining rewards go out. And then what we do is as you stream into the contract, you get a portion of the emissions. So if you're the only one streaming into the contract, you get all the output. If you're streaming 50%, like let's say you're streaming $1,000 a month and someone else streams $1,000 a month, you're both gonna get 50% of tokens. And so that's very similar to the mechanics of Bitcoin mining. And what that solves is, that solves the miner extractable value problem, which is when you launch a token on like a DEX, all the activity and volatility creates opportunities for sandwich attacks and front running. So that is all done away with on our platform, and the money that goes into the purchase of the token goes directly to the team.
Could you discuss what Superfluid is doing a little bit more, and then I guess how Ricochet Exchange is using it?
Yeah, so Superfluid is a streaming payment solution on Polygon. And the way to think about it is, the primary use case of Superfluid today is salary streaming. So if you're getting a $5,000 a month salary, it's being streamed to you, you can access those funds because they're credited to you on a per second basis. So that's how their streaming technology works. You actually specify a rate in terms of tokens per second. So because there's 18 decimals on tokens, you get these little rates. And then the contract, as the blocks tick on, each block is like 2 seconds or so apart, you get credited with more funds. They also, and under the hood, I believe they use ERC 777. So the way that Ricochet uses that streaming payments is when people come to the platform, it's not a unlimited approval, nor is it a deposit your funds into this contract. Instead, you wrap your funds into super tokens, which are very much just a wrapped version. It takes the ERC20 token and adds on the ERC 777 capabilities, and then you can open up a stream. And so the funds are not accessible to the contract until they're credited on a per second basis. So we don't have an unlimited approval on your funds. You don't have to deposit your funds into our contracts. They just sort of stay in your wallet. And then they also, so that's what Superfluid is primarily known for, is the streaming. But the other solution they have is a distribution, token distribution. And this is what lets us actually scale it, because the token distribution contract lets us pay millions of people with the same footprint as if we were paying blockchain footprint, as if we were paying like 10 people. So the exchange we have doesn't scale block space proportional to the number of users.
What are your thoughts on the evolution of Polygon to this point?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard for me to kind of remember the history, but in terms of like when I heard about these things, Polygon was the first, like the first network that I heard of, which was like a side chain of Ethereum, a layer 2 of Ethereum, whatever you want to really say about it. And they were, kind of going to hackathons, they had a presence. And then of course, like the projects I work with, like Teller, we started working together in like 2019. They had a lot of good things to say about Matic. So I think it's, from an user experience perspective, it's great for me. I have an exchange that does support withdrawals to Polygon, so it's been very easy for me to use it. I find transactions are pretty quick. There was like one period where gas got really ridiculous. There was also a period where gas was so cheap that there was spam on the network. But they've actually, and they've also implemented EIP 1559, which is like the burning of the base fee, or I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, but so like from my perspective, they're very capable both technically with what they've done and like from a business perspective. The other thing I really like is they are a team out of India, and I think India is one of the fastest growing economies. So I think that they just have this like headwind of that. And yeah, that's sort of my thoughts on Polygon.
What are your thoughts on ETH2 and Ethereum scaling?
Yeah, so I look forward to switching over from proof of work to proof of stake. I think proof of work serves the distribution purpose, fair distribution. But at a certain point, it's just like, okay, well now we're just kind of like getting a little ridiculous with this. So I do kind of support switching to proof of stake, and I think the way that it's been handled so far has been successful in the sense that they've set up this second chain, beacon chain. They have stakers. They're staking real ETH. They've been doing it for a while. I have a friend that does it in his basement with a little Intel computer, and he's actually doing much better than me as a Bitcoin miner. I forget what his thing makes, but from like an energy use perspective and all of the hassle I go through. So I think it will I also think Ethereum too will have a decentralizing effect, even though it's a kind of a high price to enter the 32 ETH. I still think, just because my friend was able to do it, he's been wanting to mine for years. Like, that's how we met each other, because I've been mining for years, and he never really could do it because all the things you need. So with this, he had 32 ETH, he had gotten them very cheap, and so now he knew that was coming a long time. So he had a lot of time to go out and get 32 ETH at prices far below where they are now. And yeah, I mean, I'm not really that concerned about like, oh, this hasn't happened yet. Like, I know that it will happen just because all of the things that Ethereum has kind of done technically, they've done really well, right? Like, there were a couple years in the beginning where there was like kind of, I guess, some friction and things, but there hasn't really been that much friction. A lot of the friction sort of comes with like the peripheral services. So like when they did do EIP 1559, things like Trezor, Ledger, MetaMask, all sorts of different dApps all kind of had trouble dealing with that. But as far as the mechanism worked, it worked great, right? So so I'm like not holding my breath for them to do the ETH2. I'm also not like, oh, they haven't done ETH2. I think when it comes, it's going to actually do really well. And then from like a user perspective, they're going to shard the chain. So like even when they do ETH2, it's not really going to change anything. But once they do shard the chain, from like an architecture perspective, I think that's a fine scaling method, and I think it will work really well. And then you're going to have projects like mine, which reduce the number of transactions required to do things, and other people will realize that what they're doing doesn't scale because they have to pay this gas fee, and so the markets will adjust and things will, I think, come back down. And everyone has Ethereum, so everyone's going to build on Ethereum when it's it's less fees. So.
Do you mine at home, Bitcoin?
No, I started mining at home in Bitcoin. I learned to mine Bitcoin while I was in university and didn't really do anything with it. And then Bitcoin broke 1,000, and I was like, okay, let me buy some small miners. So I had a couple of them, traded up, and then moved into like the basement from like my room, like with the window. And then I started doing some software development, tooling, like network engineering is what I do. So I met some people who had facilities, co-located the machines that I had in those facilities. And then in 2019, everything got like wrecked. So I was liquidating people, and then I was liquidating myself, my own miners. And then, now I sold almost all of my miners. I had CPUs, GPUs, and ASICs. Sold almost everything. And then right around the airdrop seasons in early 2021, I sort of saw what was happening with like the chip shortage and the price going up, and I was like, I think it's a good investment just to buy the physical miners. They actually, like, surprisingly, if I hadn't sold all my miners, they probably would have outperformed my Ethereum and Bitcoin holdings because the prices went up. So I always buy the top of the line miners. That's what I bought at the time. I bought top of the line that I can get. So I bought Canon, Avalon, 1245 miners, and I have a small fleet that I run in a co-location facility with the guy that I used to do some software development with.
What advice do you have for somebody who is like an individual thinking about mining Bitcoin and or crypto? Or maybe we could do this in two different, first Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I'm a Bitcoin miner, so I don't want you to come on the network, so like don't mine Bitcoin. But also like just from like a investment standpoint, I think there are better investments. Like if you want to get into crypto, even mining itself. So I don't necessarily recommend getting into Bitcoin. I kind of think with the cycles, it's currently also saturated. So like the time to get into Bitcoin mining was probably like a year or like a year and 6 months ago, when equipment was available and things like that. So yeah, I don't really recommend it. I also don't recommend mining contracts. I don't know why like all the finance people in my life like come asking about, well, what do you think about these Bitcoin mining contracts? And it's like, well, I mean, those are, I think, even riskier investments than just buying the miners themselves, because at least when you buy the miners, you have the physical miners. So yeah, that's what I think about Bitcoin mining.
What do you think about Bitcoin?
I like Bitcoin. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think that when it comes to a store of value asset that can be used by institutions, large institutions, nations, I think it is Bitcoin, and it will always be Bitcoin. And it will continue to have cycles. I think that that's almost at like predictable, like a clock even, which I think is actually like reduces some of the concern around volatility, because like, well, we can just look like, where are we at the clock? And you can kind of tell like, okay, what should we be doing? So yeah, I think it's a great asset. Like I said, I mine the Bitcoin. I don't hold a lot of Bitcoin, mostly because I'm still like holding my own project token and the token of some of the projects that I use. And so I'm kind of concentrated on like my own projects and investing in those, which I think makes a lot of sense for me. But if I get into this process where it's like, okay, I need to start like holding some things in stable assets or thinking long term. I wouldn't go to gold. I would use Bitcoin, because it's like this digital asset. It's very easy to work with. It works really well as collateral. People take collateral with Bitcoin. So yeah, I think it's great.
What's next for Ricochet Exchange, or what else do people need to know about Ricochet Exchange?
Yeah, so what's next for Ricochet Exchange is that we are supporting streaming your funds into yield-bearing products and then distributing the yield back to you in real time. And what that opens up is this ability for yield aggregators to be built by people who are not coders, because you can sort of set up this flow which says like, okay, I want to stream into a Sushi Swap liquidity pool, so I will be receiving liquidity pool tokens, but the contract will stake those liquidity pool tokens, and you'll also receive Matic and Sushi rewards. So by streaming into the contract, you create 3 inbound streams. 2 of them are Sushi and Matic, and so you can decide what you want to do with those. So you could potentially sell the Sushi you could create the classic loop, right? So just go back to the underlying asset and keep compounding into that, or you could choose to sell those into another asset like Bitcoin, right? Which is a very common strategy, which is like you farm the asset, you sell the tokens that you get, and sometimes people simultaneously will short the asset because they're holding some of it. And then of course we can support larger flows. So you could farm this asset here, stream it and swap it for this, and then put it and deposit it here. So we've done the Sushi example that I described has been done with real money. The unfortunate thing is Sushi LP tokens like ETH DAI was what we supported, or ETH USDC, I forget. That was not a very good investment post launching the product, like 3 months after. So it didn't become a very popular product. But what we're going to do next is just a yield-bearing stablecoin, which I think is probably going to be the most popular. People will be earning stablecoins, and they will be able to stream those into yield-bearing products. And that's going to be possible because Superfluid's biggest use case right now is salary streaming. So there's a whole, and it's their fastest growing as far as I can tell. There's a whole population of people that are receiving inbound streams. And so for them, they're getting paid in real time. It makes sense for them to invest it in real time to take advantage of compounding.
Where can people find Ricochet Exchange and you?
Yeah, so I'm available on Twitter. I'm Mike Genn on Twitter. And Ricochet Exchange is Ricochet Exchange on Twitter. Those are probably the best places to kind of keep up to date. As far as like on a day-to-day basis, we use Discord. Our Discord is very much like for the team. So we don't have a lot of like, social stuff or whatever. Like for the most part, we use it to coordinate development and like business development things. but it's a great place to be, and I'm in there. I'm active every day, and you can chat directly with me if you want over Discord. It's probably one of the best places too.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine.